Healing is good, but prevention is better. So I'm still talking about psychosomatic diseases, but what if we could prevent diseases from happening? In our personal life, we can maintain and guard the peace of God in our heart. We can maintain and guard the joy of God in our heart. Peace of God you will have, when you communicate with Him. When He speaks His love to you, He speaks to you. He tells you not to worry. And so He gives you peace, and I can give you many examples later. We keep that peace. It brings health. We can keep the joy. We can worship God, and we stay in a position of joy, and that will improve our health. But what if we live in a toxic environment, a negative environment? So I want to share some scriptures with you that we find in the book of Proverbs about what people say to one another and what is the effect of words on people. And so we know how vulnerable children are when we tell them, I wish you were not born. Before you were born, mom and dad had peace with one another, and since you are there, we are fighting continuously. So words that destroy a child and give it the impression that it's not wanted, they can be destructive for our whole life. Words can be very important, but also on adults. Words can be very destructive. So we'll take some Bible verses. And the first one we find in Proverbs 15, verse 4. And it says, a soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. Another one. Light in a messenger's eyes brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the bones. Proverbs 16, verse 24. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. We're talking about words, the words of the messenger, the words that bring peace, the words that give confirmation. So if you live in a family where positive words are spoken to you, if you're part of a church where they know how to confirm one another, how to comfort one another, how to encourage one another, this does change your sense of identity. It does change the condition of your heart, and it also changes the condition of your body. We Western people live in a kind of culture in which it's kind of race. And it starts at school. You have to do your repetitions, your rehearsal, and the teacher comes with a red pencil. I mean, today it's all on WhatsApp and on computer, but in the past it had to be written, and the teacher came with a red pencil to indicate what was wrong. So the emphasis is on what is wrong. Even in church, we see people criticizing one another about anything, about your voice, about your clothing, about your habits. Sometimes there's even a kind of joy when somebody falls in sin, because the whole atmosphere is criticism, a kind of Pharisaistic attitude in which we think it's even okay to criticize one another because the truth should be said. This is a very disruptive, and it leads to sicknesses. When Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 11 about the Holy Supper, he addresses a certain subject about loving one another. In that time, Holy Supper was always connected with an agape meal, a love meal. And Paul noticed how rich people, brought their picnic basket with roasted chicken and everything to the meal and ate that. And the poor just had a piece of dry bread or even nothing, and they ate that. And people were not sharing. A great lack of love during the agape meal. And Paul says, and that is not the Holy Supper. And that is not the place where the Lord is present. And so he even says, therefore, because of the lack of love, many of you are sick and some have even died. As a kind of judgment. Of course, you can see it as a judgment from the point of God, but also like a self-inflicted judgment. When you criticize one another, when there's no love, people feel no love, they feel no belonging, they don't develop a strong identity, they feel rejected, and sickness and even early death is the result. So what does it mean? It means that we as a church community, I'm now talking about church community, we have the obligation to encourage one another. And so very often I take the example of a child, very young child that goes to kindergarten for the first time. When this child comes home, it brings a piece of paper with a kind of drawing. And on this drawing is a person. Well, the way a child does it, the head is a circle, the body is a circle, the arms are just lines, one has 4 fingers, one has 6 fingers, the legs are just lines, on the head are 5 hairs. And so this child comes home with a drawing and shows it to mother. And of course the mother says, well, that's nice, that's your first drawing. And then she makes a little mistake and says, but who is it? And the child is very surprised and says, Mommy, can't you see that? That is you. That is you. Well, now there are 2 approaches, 2 answers that the mother can give on that, and they are both true. The mother could say, that's not me, that doesn't look like me, I have more hair than that, and I don't have such a belly, that's not me. You will have to learn a lot before you are as good as Picasso. That's one option. And the other option is that the mother says, oh, I can see it, it's beautiful. You know what we do? We pin it on the wall, and when your daddy comes home, it's the first thing he sees, the beautiful picture you made of Mommy. And you can imagine the child is just growing because identity is established, inner security is growing. This child is just built up. Now about the truth. The mother in the first case, when she says, it doesn't look like me, of course it's true. I mean, the picture doesn't look like Mommy. It's a truth, it's a kind of truth. And the child will have to learn a lot before it can make a proper drawing. It's in some way true. And the other thing, is that true? I can see it, just like me. You can be proud of it. We'll show it to your father. Yeah, it's another kind of truth. We all realize that the last example, the mother who praises her child, is the right way to raise a child. We all know that. Why? I would say there are 2 perspectives. The one perspective is the perspective on what is missing. What is missing? The school perspective, your failures, what is not good, the red pencil, focusing on what has not been perfected yet. And the other perspective is more like God's perspective. He sees the potential, he sees the future, he sees how it could be developed later. And he already includes that in his way of judging. In fact, it's not judging, it's just building. So this is true in church, it's true in family. And so to prevent psychosomatical diseases, we all have an obligation to support, to encourage one another. Sometimes in church we find this toxic environment. We criticize the pastor speaks negative about us, we speak negative about one another. can even be a competition, among the worshippers in the church. Who will have the lead? Competition, the wish for recognition. So we find jealousy and all kind of emotions, even within church, that often results in judging and criticizing one another. And the result is a deterioration of our health condition. And we're guilty. We're guilty of it. I've been guilty about that, and you probably also have been guilty in doing that. And it's a sin because we do not have the right to judge. God didn't appoint us to judge one another. You can say, well, it's my opinion. I am allowed to be critical. Okay. You really have to ask God. You really have to ask God, can I say those things? Should I say those things? Remember, when our speaking is not in agreement with God's speaking, when our thinking is not in agreement with God's thinking, when we are in disagreement with God, it is sin. I rather say it right forward, it's sin. We are supposed to harmonize our thoughts with God and to harmonize our speech with God. Peter even says, when you speak, let it be words as from God. When you do things, let it be deeds as from God. So it should be an imitation of the character of God. Our speaking, our thinking, the way we deal with one another. If we don't do that and we have our sense of self-righteousness, we are right and we can criticize and we judge on what stage you are on the ladder, not only are we sinning, but we're also destroying other people. We're making them sick. So this is about prevention. But you will notice that as soon as you start ministering, you will notice the pain that people have when they're under criticism. And that healing can come when you start hearing the voice of God, who is mainly supportive, mainly confirming, and always loving. There's another aspect about it, and we will find that in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 20. From the fruit of their mouths a person's stomach is filled, with the harvest of their lips they are satisfied. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. This refers mainly to what we speak about ourselves. So if we speak critically about ourselves, I am not good enough, no one loves me, the language of self-pity, the language of negativism, I'm sick, I have pain, the complaining attitude. Well, we all know about complaining in the Old Testament and how God dealt with complaining. There are not so many examples about self-pitying, but self-pitying really is a sin. You might find this hard or straightforward. Self-pitying is a sin. I know it feels good, when things are against you. We easily start self-pitying, but you have to get out of it quickly, because self-pitying separates you from God. Because in fact, you are saying, no one loves me, I'm always unlucky, no one sees me, no one recognizes me, and I always have bad luck, things go wrong, and the whole world is against me, while God is for you. So self-pity is living in a lie, is hiding yourself in a cave of lies. And in fact, you want everyone to join you in the cave and say, yeah, you have a hard life, it's difficult for you, yeah, we understand. So you're building a structure of lies. So the language of self-pity, the language of death, the language like, I will not live long, and I have pain here, and I have pain there, the language of complaining will make you even more sick. On the other hand, positive proclamations, the proclamations of faith, expressing your belief that God is healing, expressing that you have hope, that expressing joy, it brings about healing. We should not exaggerate it. I mean, sometimes even that becomes a method. I remember one day a woman came up front for ministry, and so I asked her, "Are you sick?" And she says, "No, by the grace of God, I am healed." I said, "So you're not sick?" "No, by the grace of God, I am healed." I said, "But do you have pain?" And she said, "Yes." So she had this idea that she could not make any negative proclamation, that she could not admit that she was sick, because in that case, her own words would testify against her. Of course, that is again a principle, and it's an exaggeration. If you have pain, you have pain. If you're sick, you're sick. You can easily say that. But so positive speaking has to do with your expectation. Do you expect it to get worse? Do you expect to die? Do you expect that everybody will leave you? And that no one loves you? When you use that kind of expressions and you proclaim that all the time, then it will get worse. It will get worse. On that, I have a little anecdote. Well, it's in fact a very sad story. I was ministering to a group of refugees. So I was requested to prophesy over them and then maybe have a short time of ministry. So there came this man, and before he could tell me anything and say anything about his condition or his life, I started prophesying, and the prophecy was like this: don't proclaim the negative things that happen to you. Don't proclaim them again and again, because it will be like an iron chain and an iron ball on your leg, a kind of prison that prevents you from moving forward. You really have to leave that behind and focus on Jesus. When I finished the prophetic word, that man got angry with me. And he said, "But you don't even know what happened to me. My father got arrested, and my mother and my brothers and sisters, we were very poor. We suffered hunger." I said, "Well, that must have been very painful. But the Lord just told you not to proclaim the negative things that happened to you." Well, he got even more angry. And he says, "But you don't even know what happened to us, because then my neighbor came and beat me with a stick." I said, "Well, that must have been very painful. I can feel with you. But the Lord just told you, do not proclaim all those negative things that happened to you." Well, he got furious. He says, "But you don't know what happened to me. Then my other neighbor came. He also beat me with a stick, and he beat me so hard that from that day I started stammering and I lost speech." I said, "Well, he must have beaten you very hard. But the Lord just told you not to proclaim those negative things." I couldn't stop him. I tried 5 times. I couldn't stop him with proclaiming all the bitterness that had been in his life. And so I whispered to God, what should I do with him? What can I do for him? How can I minister to him? And I was shocked by God's answer, because the Lord says, "I cannot help him. Neither can you." Then I understood that this man made self-pity to his identity. The negative things that happened to him gave him some status. "Look at me, I suffered the most of all of you." He made the suffering to his identity. And God simply is not willing to enter our cave of self-pity. He wants us to come out, to face daylight, to look in his face and say, "I am beloved and God is going to help me." So the words that we speak can have a destructive effect on our whole life and also on our health. Positive words, words of faith. Later I'll talk about the difference between willpower and faith, but words of faith, expectation, open yourself for the love of God. They will bring healing.